Maybe you've decided, the U.S., that starving kids are no longer your thing.
Senator Tim Kaine, he's a Democrat, a kind of a nice guy. He's questioning the, Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Michael Regas, about food, storing food, starving children, crazy things like that. He's questioning this guy about what the heck is the State Department doing? They're allowing food to expire, meaning it's not safe to use anymore, and then burning it. And he's questioning this guy, and I really encourage you to watch this whole thing. And if you need to, watch it 2 or 3 times, because it actually says a lot about the cruelty of this administration.
Kane, I guess you made the deal. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Regas, good to see you again. Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce into the record an article from Reuters dated May 16, 2025, titled, "Exclusive U.S. Aid Cuts Leave Food for Millions Moldering in Storage."
It will be entered in the record.
Let me just read some excerpts from this article that came out 2 months ago today. Food rations that could supply 3.5 million people for a month are moldering in warehouses around the world because of U.S. aid cuts and risk becoming unstable. The food stocks have been stuck inside 4 U.S. government warehouses since the Trump administration's decisions in January to cut global aid programs. A spokesperson for the State Department, which oversees USAID, said in response to detailed questions about the food stocks that it was working to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of aid programs and their transfer by July as part of the USAID decommissioning process. Quote, USAID is continuously consulting with partners on where to best distribute commodities at USAID warehouses. A proposal to hand the stocks to aid organizations is on hold. Finally, nearly 500 tons of high-energy biscuits stored at a USAID warehouse in Dubai are due to expire in July, according to a former USAID official. The biscuits could feed at least 27,000 acutely malnourished children for a month. The biscuits are now likely to be destroyed or turned into animal feed. That article was from 2 months ago. Yesterday, The Atlantic reported that the expiration date on those 500 tons of nutritious food for starving kids was now upon us, and the U.S. had decided to incinerate that food rather than allow starving children to have it. Mr. Regas, you're the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources. These are resources that were purchased with U.S. taxpayer dollars. They're specifically designed to save the lives of starving children. Why is it a good use of resources to not distribute that food to kids and instead burn it?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'd have to look into that particular issue and see how those foodstuffs got there.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I asked this question at a hearing yesterday, so you would be prepared to know that I would ask it today. And we called your office to tell you that I would ask it today. So the notion that you need to look into it strikes me as a little bit odd. As you sit here today, is that food being distributed to kids, or is it being incinerated?
If it's been expired, my understanding is it's the policy of the government to not distribute expired food or medicine.
Then given that this has been written about for months, and the article in March that I introduced in the record was not the first, we've been asking Secretary Rubio about this back into March. Since it has been known for months that this food would have an expiration date, why has the State Department decided to burn it rather than distribute it to starving children?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that question, Senator. I am as distressed about that as you are.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, does that kind of make you feel ashamed? Are you proud of it, or are you indifferent to it?
Look, I don't think it's, I'm not going to say I'm ashamed or proud or indifferent to it, but I think that was a failure.
How about this, just as a statement of proposition? If the U.S. uses taxpayer dollars to buy specialty foods for starving children, I think it's better that the food be distributed to starving children
Of course.
rather than incinerated.
I
You would agree with
completely
me
agree
on
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was just a casualty of the.
I have a hard
cut down
time.
of
I view it as an intentional thing, because if we suddenly woke up in July, oh gosh, the expiration date is today.
Yeah.
You know, that would be one thing. But in March, there was a request by the World Food Program and others. Look, if you're not going to distribute it, maybe you've decided, the U.S., that starving kids are no longer your thing. But you have this asset. If you're not going to distribute it, we'll distribute it.
Yeah.
So it's not a mistake if you've been on notice of it for 2 months and you've made the decision to keep the warehouse locked and allow this food to be destroyed, rather than, again, I think the article says this would feed at least 27,000 acutely malnourished children for a month. I mean, so is this incompetence or cruelty or both?
I'd have to look into what the facts of the matter were. If there were another aid organization that was asking to have access to that, to deliver it. And
Well, yeah, I want you to look into it. I really hoped you'd come to me today and say, having been put on notice, I was going to ask this. We're going to give the food to kids. Yeah. Hey, you went to Boston University. Who is the most famous BU alum?
The most famous BU alum?
Next to you.
I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone that's graduated from BU. But
I'll tell you who it is.
Okay.
Martin Luther King Jr. Okay. What do you think Martin Luther King Jr. would say about a nation that purchased food for starving kids and then locked it in a warehouse until it expired and incinerated it, rather than giving it out so that 27,000 starving kids could survive meagerly for 1 more month?
Well, we're still the biggest giver of aid anywhere in the world by far. So I think, look,
I'll just conclude. I want to hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. A lot of complicated issues. You know, sometimes the tiniest detail really exposes the soul. A government that is put on notice, here are resources that will say 27,000 starving kids, can you please distribute them or give them to someone who can, who decides, no, we would rather keep the warehouse locked, let the food expire, and then burn it. To me, that really exposes the soul of this endeavor.
And here next we have Tammy Bruce, spokesman for the State Department. State Department controls stuff like this, you know, foreign food stuff. Now, she mumbles about trying to figure out what to say for a while, and then she's going to come up with this goofball answer.
Situation where the 500 tons of high energy biscuits are set to expire in a warehouse in the Middle East. The statement from the department yesterday said that the U.S. would always look to try to avoid any kind of food waste, try to repurpose it. Is there any indication that repurposing might happen at this point?
Well, there's a lot of interesting numbers that have been moving about with this story. There's some basic responses I can give you, including the fact that if something is expired, we will destroy it. It's a matter of whether or not it's safe to distribute. But I think what's important and what part of the story is here, and a lot of people don't know this, is that we have been feeding the world's hungry for generations. And we've done it because we can. The issue is are we doing it as efficiently as we can and as smartly as we can? We, as an example, distribute roughly 1 million metric tons of food aid every year.
We feed the world. We feed the world. No, we used to feed the world. We're not feeding anymore. We're not doing any of that stuff anymore. That stuff is going to rot in the wherever it's stored because they don't care. They don't want to do this. Even though we have paid our farmers to grow this food, we process the food, and we've set it out there ready to go. But she's saying, oh, we're paying, we're doing all this food stuff. No, that was during the Biden administration and others before it. They were feeding the world. We are not anymore. She is full of crap.
Of the 1 million tons of food distributed annually by the United States, 500 metric tons of high energy biscuits also is part of what your question is in the news has been that they were destroyed and they were expired, and yet that 500 metric tons represents less than 1% of the food aid that we distribute around the world.
That is used to distribute.
I would also note the difference in its situation why those biscuits were stored. Americans don't realize, perhaps many do, that we store emergency food all around the world for people in the event of a catastrophe in that region. So we have food that we purchase and it goes to, let's say, the World Food Program or to another distributor assigned to specific sites for distribution. And then we have food that is assigned to be held in the event of an emergency. Those are emergency frameworks, and they are not distributed. They're there in the event that obviously something horrible happens and you need that kind of nutrition. That's where those biscuits were. That was 500 metric tons of what they say HEB, high energy biscuits, and that is less than 1% of the food aid that we distribute, as I've mentioned.
Then she goes into this fairly long-winded sort of thing about how we store things like these biscuits for emergencies, and then when they're stored in these warehouses in case we might need them. If we don't need them, we have to destroy them. That is not how that works. Nobody ever does stuff like that, at least not on purpose. When you store things, it's just like a grocery store, for Pete's sake. They put their product, the oldest product, out so that it doesn't expire. There's a system for this USAID that, let's say there's an emergency doesn't happen, and that's emergency stuff. They don't just throw it away. They know when it's about to be to expire, and so they find places in the world that need it. I mean, these are usually things for disasters. You know, they're saving it for a disaster or something. But there's ongoing disasters all over the world. If you have something where some kids are starving, you know, it's not like a flood or an earthquake or nothing like that. It's just the situation is there. Then rather than destroy the food, you move it and to where it's needed, and you distribute it. She's trying to indicate that they just throw it all away. And she comes up with this battery analogy that you're saving batteries for a power outage, and the batteries go away after a while. It's a ridiculous sort of comparison, but you know, what else can they do? They're backing stupidity. They're backing total waste and corruption.
The best analogy I can use is that I think most of us have, I do, I'll just refer to myself, a lot of batteries in a battery carrier that I don't use, that they're there in the event of an emergency and the electricity is down, and I know what needs batteries and what doesn't need batteries. And if you wait long enough and there's no emergency, they start to do weird things. They start to sometimes bubble over and get a little corroded. That's why you should do something. That's right. Candles, perfect in earthquake country also. Yes. Batteries, though, we have them. They're situated. Other survival stuff, you situate it, and then you have to get rid of it if fortunately you don't have to use it. That's this story. The story here is the nature of the commitment of the United States to food aid, which we all commit to.
This is what you got, guys. This is what these people are doing to you. And you may not feel it because you're not the starving child over there. But that's the soft power that we're losing. Because we even take it to Afghanistan, for Pete's sake. We pulled out of there. We sent food there. At least we used to. Not anymore. And I think it does us good. Because it doesn't say, because your government isn't like my government, I'm still going to give you this food. Tells them we care. Not anymore, because we don't.